what is up, Team Rock Rep? Coach Chris here, hitting you all with another new weekly video. And I'm going to preface this one by saying it's going to be a lot more opinion-based and not so much the science-y videos that you all have become accustomed to over the last several years of my content, or the short duration of this YouTube channel. And the topic is drugs in bodybuilding, if you cannot pick up on that from the title or the thumbnail. But before I get into that, I want to point out these awesome hoodies. If you are like me and the winter time is the time where you put on some extra fluff, this hoodie is perfect for you. And also, if you're trying to look like a swag hound, I suggest you get one. They're super cheap, super comfy, and they ship to your house in 3 to 5 days. So go check it out on RockRepFit.com. Order one today. All right, so drugs and bodybuilding. I'm going to talk a little bit all over the place just because, like I said, this is an opinion-based video, so I might be a little bit all over. I do have some points that I want to cover that I've written down, but I might be a little bit all over the place, so I do apologize with such a broad topic. But as you could probably assume as a prep coach, the drug side of bodybuilding is something that I'm asked about quite frequently, either from prospective competitors or people that just spectate the sport and they want to know really how much are these guys taking, or do you even have to take steroids to be a competitive bodybuilder? So that's where I'm going to sort of start my talk. And the answer to that particular question is no, you don't have to take steroids to be a competitive bodybuilder. And also, just to clarify, because some people might be brand new to the channel or brand new to bodybuilding, I am talking about anabolic steroids when I say drugs. I'm not talking about narcotics here. And yeah, so no, you don't have to be on drugs to be a competitive bodybuilder. Now, you do have to be a little bit realistic with yourself as to whether or not you should compete in a natural organization or organization like the NPC or IFBB that says that they're subject to drug tests, but they don't really drug test. Or in other words, you don't have to drug test to compete at these shows for an organization like the NPC, which is probably the most well-known bodybuilding amateur organization. At least to my knowledge, I don't know of any that surpass it in terms of its reputation. So, yeah, you don't have to take them, but there are some implications. If you decide to go the natural route, obviously a natural organization might be best for you. And if you do decide to go to the NPC, my suggestion would be, don't go that route unless you have really great genetics, or if you've been working long enough to where you have a really good foundation, because you will be at a big disadvantage most of the time. It's not like this at every show, but a vast majority of the shows, especially things where sponsorships or national qualifications may be on the line, you're going to run into a lot of competition that are using anabolic steroids. And if you're natural, you're going to be at a pretty big disadvantage. Even if you do have great genetics, a lot of these people that are chasing down a national qualification or a pro card, they typically have the combination of good genetics and anabolic steroid use. I'm not saying that is the case all of the time. I know a couple of IFBB men's physique pros who are actually fully natural. They've never touched a single dose of testosterone in their life, and they just have really freaky genetics, but they are in the 0.5% of the population that can do that. Yeah, so I know that's sort of off, but it's a question I get a lot concerning drugs and bodybuilding. If you have to do them, no, you don't. Just be realistic with yourself about the outcome and what you anticipate to accomplish or what you expect to get out of the sport if you're natural versus enhanced. So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about drugs' influence on the coaching scene, because as someone that has been, in the online prep space for about 5 years now, it's something that I've seen really blow up, and I just feel like it's something that should be talked about. So drugs and coaching, the problem with anabolic steroids in the sport of bodybuilding is that we're noticing more and more that there are a lot of coaches who don't necessarily know. I'm not going to say not know what they're doing, but they don't know what they're doing. And so they rely really heavily on drugs to make up for their lack of knowledge. And people argue with me on this all day and all night, but go talk to any coach that actually has a degree or has a background in science or exercise muscle physiology. They're going to tell you the same thing. A lot of these coaches that really lack the knowledge that it takes to safely prep, and that's the key word, safely prep someone for the stage, getting them lean enough, making sure that on the day of the show they're dry, they're hard, they look good, they look their absolute best. If they don't have the knowledge to do that, they're just going to rely on the drugs. And you can tell this is the case because there's a lot of people who run gear going into a show, and they look decent, but there's a lot of even natural guys that even, they've never taken steroids and they look better than the enhanced guys. And that sometimes just comes down to the fact that they had a better coach and they peaked better. And so that's one thing from a coaching perspective that does get things, a little bit, it makes things a little bit frustrating, right? Because there's a lot of people out there charging obscene amounts of money. They don't really know what they're doing, but, they can tell you to run 800 milligrams of testosterone, and they can tell you what compounds to take, 6 and 8 weeks out from the show and blah, blah, blah. It's really frustrating. And not just that, it's also doing a disservice to the sport because people are typically running into problems after running such hard dosages of these steroids going into a show. And then they think it's bodybuilding's fault, but it's really not. You can prep safely and not have any health effect afterwards if you recover properly. And so that's a major issue. People are trying to make up for their lack of knowledge with the use of steroids, and you simply can't do that. You might be able to produce some sort of result, but it's not going to be an ideal result. If you are taking steroids, you need to have a coach that knows what they're doing. You can't replace the knowledge with a drug. Plain and simple. So another thing I want to talk about is a really good example of sort of that point. And that is, and I don't usually name drop in my videos, but a lot of people know what I'm talking about, especially if they follow the sport of bodybuilding for any time at all, is the Oxygen Gym out in Kuwait. And the most popular bodybuilder from this gym would be Big Ramy, however you want to say it. I'm going to say it both ways because I don't want you leaving comments saying that I said it wrong. I'll say Big Ramy or Big Ramy, however you want to pronounce it. He's probably the most popular and famous bodybuilder from this gym. This gym is so well known that even American bodybuilders have gone to train there, right? Because it's such an intense gym, and it seems like it's a breeding ground for bodybuilders, especially at the Olympia stage. There's a bunch of Olympians that are from this gym. The problem, though, is if you look at the bodybuilders that this gym's producing, yes, their physiques are absolutely incredible. But the problem is that they're almost too much. And now, if you've talked to me about my opinions on today's bodybuilding versus, the golden era, I'm going to choose the golden era every single time because those physiques, believe it or not, were virtually, or at least a lot more realistic than the physiques being produced today. And I'm comparing that to the average person, for someone like me that trains hard, diets hard, does all the right things. Those physiques were a lot more attainable, maybe not to the degree because those guys even back then were obviously using drugs to enhance their physique, but to a smaller scale, those physiques were attainable. Nowadays, it's just completely blown out the water, and I get it. That's why they came up with men's physique to give, that sense of, oh, I could accomplish this. And keep letting the bodybuilders, the open bodybuilders, keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger each year. And the problem is that these guys are being so pumped full of hormones that it's obviously causing a detriment to their health. I mean, just in the last year alone, you think about bodybuilders under the age of 50 that have passed away. And these guys, I'm talking larger than life. And it's not an accident. It's not because of, whatever people say. And I'm not blaming the steroids. I'm actually pro-choice when it comes to steroids. I'm not against steroid use. But there's a difference between use and misuse. And hopefully I'll make a video on that later on. for this channel for people that are curious more on my stance on steroids. But there's definitely an abuse problem in the sport because people feel like they're having to go to such extreme just in order to sell tickets. And there's got to be a line somewhere. This is just my opinion. You can take what I've talked about in this video, with a grain of salt. I'm just trying to be transparent, share my opinion on what I think of the sport. I love the sport of bodybuilding. I don't think any less of it because of the overuse steroid problem in it. But it is something I am disappointed in, and I'm hoping someday, eventually will change. Maybe people will sort of realize that it needs to be less dependent on the drugs and more dependent just on things like proportion, symmetry, and all of those are important. Obviously, it's what they get judged on, but a lot of these guys are put under this unrealistic pressure of that if they don't come in at a certain size, they're not going to sell tickets, they're not going to make a living. And while that today is partially true, I'm hoping that it won't always be true, if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but hopefully it makes sense to all of you guys as well. And I think I've really covered my opinions in pretty good depth. I don't know how long we've been going, but that's just my overall general, the few opinions that I have on drugs and bodybuilding, the state of it, and where we are currently. And with that said, I think I'm going to wrap this video up. Thank you all for your continued weekly support. If you haven't already, take the couple of moments that it takes to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The notifications are for you guys to make sure that you're not missing my videos that drop every single Monday. The subscription is the best way that you can support my channel. It helps me get more views due to YouTube's algorithm. And then also give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about drugs in the sport of bodybuilding. If you think that my opinion's spot on, or if you have a different viewpoint on it, I'm more than happy to hear it. Guys, keep tuning in each and every week. I'm trying to come up with content that's relevant for you all, so let me know. You can email me, you can visit my website, and I'll link all of that in the description box below. Until next week, stay healthy and God bless.